Hey everybody, it's Aqil Qadar from Citizen Safety Academy, and I'm here with my fellow firearms instructor, Ernest Langdon from Langdon Tactical Technology, and we're here today to talk to you about assessing your target. What happens when you shoot the target and you hit the target, or you miss the target, or you don't hit where you want to? Sometimes you can look at that target and see where those shots landed, where the holes went, and we can sometimes diagnose what you may have done from looking at it. So Ernest, what do you see as the most common misses when people are shooting a gun?
I would say that all firearms instructors see the same thing when it comes to handguns, and that is shots that are low and left from the intended aiming area. So here's what I'm trying to hit. Really small target, we'll say, but my shots are now landing low and left from my intended aiming area. And that is typically always some form of anticipation. Now, what is anticipation? That is me as a shooter trying to stop the gun from recoiling before the gun fires, and or adding in grip pressure, which is kind of the same thing,
right,
before the gun fires, and meaning gripping the gun, misaligning it low and left as I pull the trigger.
So you mean that like taking these fingers and squeezing the gun and then pressing the trigger, which moves the gun off the target slightly?
Yes, correct.
I see that a lot too.
Yeah, that would be what I would consider the most common thing that I would see, low and left, across the board, including myself. Left-handed shooters, that's gonna be low and right.
So how do you fix that?
Well, we fix that typically through dry fire. Learning to press the trigger without misaligning the gun. And that takes a lot of repetitions, because remember, there's this blast going off in front of our face. The gun's jumping up into the air. We're trying to stop it from jumping up in the air, or recoil, it's moving up into the air. And I'm trying to stop that. So I have to learn to try to stop it after the gun fires, not before the gun fires. So dry fire is very helpful, and obviously getting more comfortable with your gun, shooting more helps as well.
Where else would you say that you see other shots? How about low, right below the target here?
Super common, we will see shots that are basically straight down from the intended aiming area. And that's the same thing, it's just symmetrical, meaning that my left hand is now involved, and instead of these fingers of my right hand, if you will, rotating the gun as I pull the trigger, making it go low and left, now both hands are involved. I'm trying to stop the gun from recoiling, it ends up going straight down.
Gotcha. That's the same thing I see, and I agree with you that that's typically, once again, anticipation of the recoil, preparing for the recoil, and pushing the gun right before the gun goes off.
Correct.
Okay.
What's another one that you see?
Sometimes I see shots landing up here. So if the person was aiming to aim here or hit here, their shots may land here instead.
And what do you think that is?
Typically when I see that, it's the person is usually looking over the rear sight at the front sight. So to see the front sight of the gun, they're lifting the front of the gun so they can see the front sight. And as opposed to looking through the window of the rear sight, they're looking over it, and that raises the front of the gun. So when they press the trigger, the shots tend to land high. What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree. They're trying to see the front sight. We as firearms instructors said, look at the front sight, and then they lift it up so they can see all of it instead of looking through that rear sight notch and getting that sight picture or that sight alignment that they've been told to look. That and dropping the gun down a little bit and just trying to look at the target instead of looking through the rear sight. That is the other one. So they're like, they start looking at the target, they start lifting their head,
right, and
then that causes the gun to kind of tilt up a lot of times.
I agree. One other thing I see, Ernest, is sometimes the shots land right here, what we call 9 o'clock for a right-hand shooter or 3 o'clock for a left-hand shooter. What do you think of that?
So that is also very common. I would say there's two things there, okay? One is trigger finger placement, meaning they don't have enough trigger finger in and they're pushing on the trigger. So they're trying to pull the trigger. They've been told pull the trigger straight to the rear. They're trying to do that, but they end up steering the gun out of alignment when they pull the trigger with this finger. So typically you need to stick a little bit more trigger finger in there, and or the other really important one is, as you just mentioned a second ago, gripping harder with the left hand. The last one that I see, and this is much more uncommon, but it does pop up, and that is shots going high and to the right, okay? There's two reasons that happen. One is they've actually got too much trigger finger in, and they're actually pulling on the trigger when they pull the trigger, and that can typically cause it to go high and right. But the other one, and this is someone who's been shooting for a little bit, they've had this problem, and they say, oh, I know how I'll fix this. I'm going low and left. I'm going to start aiming just a little bit high and right to try to fix that. And so right as the gun fires, they kind of do like, I'll just do that. And then when they do stop anticipating, then the shots start creeping up behind to the right.
That makes sense. So you said too much trigger finger. What do you mean by that?
That's a really good question. So when people are pressing the trigger, how much finger they put on there. So if I put too much and I reach in too far, when I pull the trigger, instead of pulling straight to the rear, I'm actually pulling the gun to the left, or not enough, I'm pushing it to the right. But in this case, I'm talking about too much and actually pulling the gun out of alignment to the left when I pull the trigger.
Knowing how to assess your target, knowing how to look at your target and see where your shots land, and you can hopefully start working on fixing them, is going to be a very helpful thing to you when you're at the range learning how to shoot. Thanks a lot, Ernest. Check out the links below for more videos in the Beginner Shooter series.